Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all here today. Welcome to the 81st Stephen A. Ogden Jr. Class of '60 Memorial Lecture. This afternoon, we have the rare pleasure of welcoming a returning Ogden lecturer. When he delivered his first Ogden lecture here in May of 1999, Romano Prodi was barely 2 months into his tenure as president of the European Commission, a post that he held until 2004. As he addresses us this afternoon, Mr. Prodi is not quite 2 months into another very important position, his Brown faculty appointment as a university professor at large. The Ogden Lecture was established by the Ogden family as a memorial to Stephen A. Ogden Jr., a member of the class of 1960, who died in 1963 from injuries sustained in an auto accident during his junior year. As a student at Brown, Stephen dreamed of promoting international peace through a career in international relations, a dream that is still shared by the many Brown students who enter our international relations concentration and who will have an opportunity to interact with Professor Prodi. Peggy Ogden, Stephen's sister, and a member of the Brown class of 1953, is with us this afternoon. Peggy, would you please stand and be recognized? Thank you, Peg. It's always good to see you. Well, these are exceptional occasions. There are a few of these exceptional occasions. This is one, where we invite principal participants to reflect on real-time change from an insider's perspective. There are moments when that inside perspective is greatly enlarged by vastly relevant and diverse experience, adding greatly to our opportunity to learn. I think we'd all agree that today, as the G20 meeting is set to begin, global challenges are not only as complex as one can imagine, but they are evolving rapidly and dramatically. In fact, one might say that the 10 years that have elapsed between Mr. Prodi's Ogden lectures have been marked by extraordinary and complex change. European consumers have changed their francs, lira, marks, pesetas, drachmas, and crowns for the euro, a change in which Mr. Prodi played a significant role. The global economy grew to unsustainable heights only to unwind last year to disastrous effect. The world has had to face an unremitting surge of violence and global terrorism. Declarations and threats of war have continued to press upon us. Alliances have, in some cases, been frayed, in other cases, broken. Protectionism and xenophobia come more easily to nations' agendas. So these are uniquely interesting times to apply the knowledge and skills of international relations. We are therefore extraordinarily pleased to have someone of Mr. Prodi's firsthand knowledge and experience at the Watson Institute and at Brown. Now, there's no need here to speak of the relative merit of scholarship versus practical experience because he excels in both arenas. Trained as a legal scholar and an economist, he earned his law degree at the Catholic University of Milan before going on to the London School of Economics for his postgraduate study. His thesis at Catholic University was on the role of protectionism in Italy. He has served as professor of industrial organization and industrial policy at the University of Bologna and as visiting professor at Stanford, Harvard, Trento, and the Lombard Institute of Economic and Social Studies, among others. He holds over 20 honorary degrees from institutions across Europe, North America, Africa, and Asia. Of course, you know of the breadth of his public service. As technical minister, as founder of the Ulivo Coalition, which led to his first becoming Prime Minister of Italy, as head of the Union, which led to his re-entry into Italian presidential politics, and later as president of the Italian Democratic Party. He has described himself as, quote, dedicated to the European soul. He'd have to have invested so much care, time, and effort in Italian politics. But his vision is larger than Italy. We should note that last year he was named by the UN as head of the AU UN panel to improve peacekeeping in Africa. When in 1999 the university conferred the honorary Doctor of Laws on Mr. Prodi, the citation read in part, Professor, scriptor, velocipedista, Italia quondam primus minister, nunc praesis commissionis Europea. We honored him, in other words, as a professor, author, prime minister, president, and bicyclist. Further evidence of the breadth of his interests and accomplishments. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the 81st Ogden Lecturer back to Brown as University Professor at Large, Prime Minister Romano Prodi.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to be here for the second time to the Stephen Ogden Lecture. I'm really honored because I know how skilled is the audience, and so I hope that I have really the possibility of illustrate one of the real-time changes that you, President, mentioned now. I shall touch only a very specific subject, the role of Europe in the world. There is a role, there is not a role, which are the problems. And I do it, I've chosen this subject, first of all, because I think that is important. Second, because as your President told a few minutes before, I have given a big part of my life, and I think that the European endeavor is one of the most important achievements of human history. To have 6, and then 12, then 15, then 25, then 27 countries that were fighting each other, one against the other for so many centuries, having them together with problems, and we shall analyze the problem, but ending all the fightings, all the war that we had before is an enormous achievement for the humanity. And is also an example that African Union is trying to imitate now, that is just under deep analysis everywhere in the world, because it's a change in the world scenario. Of course, today I shall not sing the hymn of Europe, you know. I shall simply analyze achievements and problems that we have, putting my attention to today's problem, what is happening now, not making history, but looking more to the future than to the past. I start only to mention what happened 17 years ago, the collapse of the Soviet Union. This collapse has changed all the world scenario. This has made, for one moment, you remember, think to a monopolar world, a world in which we could have only one power, United States, and there were intellectuals also speaking about the end of history. History never ends, but this was meaning that we were going into a direction of having only one power in the world. And in few years, things have changed radically. And I think that the change has been important. This important change has been originated mainly by the Iraqi war. I mention the Iraqi war because there was really the beginning of the change, and also one of the reasons of the deep split inside European nations. You can't understand, you can't really think how deep was split. In the European Council, the fighting between the countries in favor and the countries against the war went so deep, you know, and in the G8, this was really rising passions and tension, you know, and, you know, I do remember in Sea Island in Georgia here, Putin shouting to Blair, "You are not God, you are not God," you know, and all that. Really, I tell this episode because it was not only a political problem. It was something that divided us so deeply, you know, that it was difficult then, and is still difficult to reorganize things together. But during the Iraqi war, something big happened. The war changed, because in the meanwhile, the war was not ended as soon, as quick as it was foreseen. It was, you know, in theory, it was the seal of the monopolar war. But because it was so difficult to end, then it moved, it speeded up the changes in the world. The first one was a more assertive Russia. After the end of the Soviet Empire, Russia was humiliated and, you know, in disarray. I do remember, because I think that here I'm not only as a professor, but also, you know, a testimony of this. I do remember how, let's say, in the meeting between Russia and the European Union in Paris, Russia was humiliated, you know, and really Yeltsin was really giving up everything, you know. This has raised a reaction and has put obliged Russia to have a change, and has put Putin in power. And Putin, now that is under scrutiny, under criticism, and but in that time, I do remember Gorbachev, who called me and came to visit me urgently, telling me, "Look, Russia is in disarray. Dissolving Russia will be a disaster for all Europe, not only Western, but Eastern Europe too. There is only way out. It's called Putin." His curriculum vitae is the most horrible curriculum that you can imagine. But please trust him, because the alternative is worse, you know. And then, talking also about this problem, I don't remember that because I spent the night before the Iraqi war, the night before the Iraqi war in the Kremlin, alone with Putin, who was trying to avoid this war. And I do remember what he told, you know, because I feel that if this war starts, Russia will be under siege, and then will follow Ukraine and then Georgia. And, you know, so we discussed it for hours and hours, whether it would be possible to avoid this. But it was too late, you know. And I think that I told him, why, if you want to avoid this war, at any cost, you didn't make a meeting with the Chinese president and France and Germany. There was no answer. I tried to understand this piece of history, but there was no answer. And so this is also part of my experience. Even in Middle East, in the most terrible cases of Middle East, the leaders don't talk each other. A war happens without any communication. This is why it's so important, the word dialogue that is pronounced now by Obama. You know, it's important because for me it's an intellectual change. It's in years of politics, the word dialogue was always put apart, you know, was never mentioned. And I think that it's difficult to run the human history without dialogue, you know. But even bigger change came in the last year, the Chinese rise. This is the historical change. I shall deepen the international aspect in next conference about Africa, but this is really the change. The first time in history in which a country exports capital, technology, and people together. I repeat, we shall deepen it, but remember that it never happened. And then, you know, linked to that, the number of population, 1.3 billion people. 25 times my own country that it was supposed to be overpopulated. So it's so you have the idea, you know. When I think about China, I always remember the old Italian joke in which a minister goes to President Mao and say, "Look, President, the Swiss army has invaded China," and the president answers, "In which hotel they are?" Because this is the reality of the world. I'm joking, but you know, I repeat, we shall analyze country by country how is the strategy, because it's different. It's different. It's a global player because of population, capital, and technology. And we are split. You know, US and Europe are split. Europe is split inside, and I think that, you know, in the global world, you can't be split. You must have a global strategy. And of course, I don't deepen this also because we have another occasion to deep it. But China has also clear big problems. You know, there is, as in any country in the world, a question mark for the future. The problem of social tension, human rights, inequalities. Even for the first time, I had the fortune to meet the Chinese leader for 25 years, almost each year. And in the last 4 or 5 years, the conversation has changed. They talk about inequality. They talk about what we call welfare, the necessity of a new welfare that is inexistent. In the only communist state in the world, there is no welfare state. You know, it's an absurdity, but people are not covered by health insurance. They are not covered by any, and this is the reason why they save so much. You know, because they have total insecurity. But now you can talk with them about that. You know, and this is another great event. But you know. Being brief on that, 2008 was the year of the end of this process of change from monopolar to multipolar world, even if United States are by far the most powerful country in the world, by far. But they cannot be alone. This is the difference, you know. And I say, I put 2008 because it's the year in which, from the popular point of view, China, with the Olympic Games, became, you know, known to everybody. And with the financial crisis, there will be no decision in the world without China. No decision will be taken in the world without China. I met the Chinese Prime Minister the last week of November. We had 2 hours conversation, almost all about crisis, the economic crisis, and in the end of the story, he told, look, I shall behave in a very responsible way. I go on buying American bonds, but I have $1,000 million on my table, and no decision can be taken around this table if I don't sit down. So the G20 next week is the beginning of a new story. G8 down, G20 up. This is the world. And another fact happened, and I go into the problem is the new European Union. There was the euro for the first time in history. We had a common currency. It never happened, also that. And then the enlargement. The enlargement is a bad word. It has no warmth in it, you know. But now it means that almost all Europe is united. 27 countries and 496 million people. Well, the first slide maybe give you a good impression of that, you know, because to be a good professor, I need a slide, you know. I never use, but you know, now everybody knows that I am cultured. You see how Europe, in terms of GNP, is 20.4%, United States 20.1%, same, a little bigger Europe, and you know how important has been now the role of China, 15.4 at PPP, and this is a different world that was 1 generation ago. And in this world, Europe is, from the economic point of view, the biggest entity. But if you go into the specific figures, Europe is the biggest exporter in the world. Germany, the first country, export more than China. And but this situation would put everybody to think that Europe is among the players, among the actors of world policy. We shall see at the end of our conversation that he's not an actor, he's a spectator. In spite he's a giant, but because of political reasons, he's not acting like a giant. But slide number 2, in the last years, Europe has grown less than good, and clearly the question mark of how we'll come out from the present situation. But this is a question mark not only for Europe, but for all the world. Slide 3. The same in graphic, how slow was the European growth in the last 5 years, how better was in the previous year. 4. Here you have the reason of this explanation. Europe is one entity, but with so different behaviors in terms of productivity. You go from Poland, Slovakia, in which the productivity per labor is very low. Of course, you have United States, that is the highest one. European countries similar to United States, Netherlands, Austria, Germany, very similar, and others, they are in very different condition because Europe is not the union of homogeneous countries, but it is the European Union of different countries. Next slide. And, well, let's keep, these are the changes in the last years, and even here you see how different is Europe and how difficult it is to put Europe together, because the differences are enormous, governed state by state. Next. And this is, I wanted to put this, even if it's not so meaningful, because it's similar to the other, for a reason. With the yellow, you have the unemployment before the crisis. With the blue, you have the unemployment now. Look how tragic different in few weeks or few months, if you want, you know, is such an enormous change that, you know, look at Spain. Spain, they had virtually no unemployment. Now they are, even the last statistics are more than 10%, even higher than this, in absolutely few weeks, to give you the idea of this crisis. Okay, I think that last point about Europe. Europe is famous, as was born also for a choice in favor of the so-called welfare states and the European model that then in the last 20 years was put in crisis because of the different behaviors country by country, was really directed to the welfare state. Let us, next slide. And this is the coefficient, very simple, of the difference in income in the European countries and in the OECD countries. You see, the most unequal countries are Mexico, Turkey, and then Portugal, and the United States, Poland and Italy. And you go with more equal states that are the Scandinavian states. And this is a fantastic picture, you know, how different is the wealthy world, let us call it, because the OECD countries are, and how different is also inside the European Union, you know. And the correlation, and then we could analyze that there is no correlation between high level of taxation and growth, because Denmark and Sweden are among the best performing countries, and they are the most equal, you know. So it's all what has dominated the previous generation, linking low taxation with growth, is not because equality is linked to taxation. Huh? There are no other, also to other reasons, but taxation is one of the main reasons of this equality. Taxation and welfare, let's say free school, free health service, additional health service, free school, you know, there is distribution through social services. And then, last slide, then we go on commenting, are concerning, look, this is very interesting that even the poorest European countries are, of course, among the 20% of the wealthiest state in the world. World inequality is even higher. And that is quite interesting, that during, from 1970 to 20s, inequality was rising everywhere in the world except in the European Union taken together as one entity, for a simple reason, that generally when you have a community, when you have a union with different levels of wealth, if you don't intervene, the difference increases. But the European policy has been helping the peripheral areas, and so you have a better behavior than in others. And in terms of poverty, European Union record is better than US for the absolute poverty. The poor, 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 because they have services and so on, less than $10 a day. But it's not so different in the, let's say, a little less poor category. So the problem is the lowest 10% bracket, in which there are the most important difference in the poverty. Next. Here, simply to show you the level of integration. The blue column is foreign investment by other European countries. And so you see that in any European country, the most part of the foreign investment, they come by European countries. So the process of integration is going, in spite of everything, is going on and on. Last one, and so we finish that. Well, this is emigrating in the crisis, the fund assets, how bigger is US compared history, compared Europe, even if the two economies, as we have seen before, are very similar. Now, movies is over. But in spite of all that we have seen, I told before, Europe is not an actor, is a spectator. Absolute spectator, you know. My experience, except few cases, but traveling in the Middle East, you feel, you know, that the politicians, my counterpart, were always asking for a deep European interest because of our involvement, because of our trade with countries, because of our investments, but without any answer. Why? Because Europe was and is divided in foreign policy. And if we analyze from Kosovo to the Middle East, the absence of a common European foreign policy and defense policy was absolutely clear. Take Kosovo. Kosovo is in the middle of Europe. Kosovo, clearly, it was a problem that needed to be solved by Europeans. And the American government should have been very happy that the European could have done it. But even in this case, the European countries were split. And this problem was tackled by the American intervention. So it was not a problem of tension with the United States. It was a problem of tension inside the European Union. Take the African policy. The only global player is China. The European Commission is working globally, but with a very limited budget. France is playing mainly only in the former French-speaking Africa, UK in the former British-speaking Africa. The result is no common policy. Take another example. The European budget is less than 1%. The European Union budget is less than 1% of European GDP. When I tried to put it to 1.12, that is nothing. The Minister of Finance, they blocked me. And third, there is no decision taken for the new enlargement that is absolutely necessary to complete Europe, giving the possibility of being member to the Balkan countries. They are Europeans. Croatia is European. Serbia is European. And to be members of the European Union is the solution of the tragic problem of Yugoslavia. The only solution. And it's the only political problem in the world in which we have a solution. But in this moment, why to enlarge the digestive capacity? And if you think that all the Balkan countries are less than 1% of all European GDP. Even if you give them 5% or 1% per year to help them, is nothing. So the problem is a political problem. A political problem. So, what do we have to do in this case? In this case, we have absolutely the necessity to go on with the process and to enhance and reinforce the European institutions. No other choice. We tried to do, in my commission, I worked on that with a strong European constitution. This was not, let's say, accepted. There was a proposal of a mediation for a European constitution, but this was blocked by the French referendum and the Dutch referendum. Then, because of that, we had another mediation, and even because of the British opposition, we didn't even call it constitution, but simply treaty, because constitution is a dirty word in some part of Europe, you know. And this treaty, that is a progress, then we shall see what, but a very prudent progress was blocked by the Irish referendum. And we go to, and you know, what is the proposal of the Lisbon Treaty, because everybody talks about the Lisbon Treaty, but nobody knows what there is inside, you know. To extend the qualified majority for some decision to new political areas, to have a commission president elected by the parliament, to have a permanent president of the European Union, a president enduring 2 years and a half, and a foreign policy chief that is a foreign minister, let us call foreign minister of Europe, you know, high representative for Europe. And these are absolutely necessity. You know now that the rotating presidency is every 6 months. How can you run a public entity rotating every 6 months the presidency? We had a strong presidency, the French one, in the last semester of last year. This year, you have a presidency that in which the president of the Republic of the Czech Republic, that is president of the European Union, is strongly against Europe. Strongly, he didn't want to have the flag on the palace during the presidency, you know, and so this is the reality of this fantastic idea that is Europe, you know. And another contradiction, we have Euro, that also the Euro has been really a great achievement, that in this moment it demonstrates how important it is. But, and we have a European Central Bank, but we have no central power for economic policy. So we have a monetary policy, but not an economic policy. And this imbalance can go on for a while, but not forever. Not forever, you know. Clearly, it is not easy to build institutions through democracy, but this is what Europe is, you know. Even in the enlargement, it was, I worked 3 years for the so-called enlargement to have new members, and you don't understand how difficult but fantastic was this exercise. We divided all the political and economic life of the countries in 31 chapters, discussed one by one. Then the national parliaments changed the laws, national government changes, you know, the political decision, bargaining on all the chapters, of course, opening the door also to countries that were not yet fully prepared, because you cannot change entirely in a few years, but giving confidence and, you know, to this process. And I do remember that, you know, the definition of Europe. I learned it when I delivered the speech to the Romanian parliament much before the entrance, you know. And there was a member of the parliament, you know, after many speech, a member of the parliament with the old man with a big bird, you know, raised and did a fantastic speech in favor of Europe. And I asked him, why you are so warm about Europe? And he told me, look, my grandfather was killed because was member of a minority. He defined himself member of the non-Hungarian minority in the Romanian parliament. So understand the complication of Europe, not only the 22 different languages, because when I am in the parliament, when I was at the commission, I was speaking only English. When I was in the parliament, I was speaking only Italian. But there were 22 different languages, you know. So this, to give you, well, I told him, why you are so warm about Europe? Say, my grandfather was killed because was member of a minority. My father was put in exile, and I went in exile because I was member of the minority. And I want Europe because it's a union of minorities. This is a definition. This is a great definition of Europe, you know. But to build this, you need, what you need now, you need clearly one decision that is difficult to get, but the end of unanimity. It's very simple with 27 countries. We can't vote at unanimity. It's clear like that. You cannot, if you have the unanimity to decide how to keep this theater, it will collapse in a few years, you know. Clearly. This is life, you know. And as a consequence, you need also to have exit clause. If a country doesn't want to belong to Europe, and there, you know, a couple of referendum against, they get out. Keeping all the treaties, all the existing, let's say, agreements with Europe, but, you know, you can't, you know. And then, as a consequence, the new Europe must be a multi-speed Europe. Let's say, we can't go to the speed of the last wagon. And so if few countries want to do something more together, they can do, with a clear condition, that the door must be always open. And if, let's say, France, Italy, and Germany want to do something more together, the door must be open for Poland, for others, you know. This is the rule. But we can't go on with the existing situation. Otherwise, all the power that we had will disappear. And this has also another consequence. We need European political parties. These are political decisions. You must have European election, not as will be in the next months, in which people vote looking only to internal problems of the different countries, in favor or against Sarkozy, in favor or against Gordon Brown, in favor or against Berlusconi. This is the campaign. We have to transform it in a European campaign. And so this is clearly the necessity that we have in front of us to transform this in a new, in actor, not in a spectator. Look, I started making a short picture of the world because I want to conclude with an historical example. You know, I am Italian, and in the Renaissance, the Italian states were really leading in all the fields. Milan, Rome, Venice, Genoa, they were leading in finance. The first subprimes were invented in Genoa. They were leading in military art, in philosophy, in technology, optics, then think to Galileo, you know. And The first globalization came with the discovery of America, with the new, let's say, trades, intercontinental trades, and the Italian states did not join together. And Italy disappeared from the world map, absolutely disappeared. So Germany, France, UK are in the same situation now, in my opinion. If they don't stick together, they will disappear from the world map, and Europe will disappear from the world map. And I think that this is a value lost for all the world. Thank you. Questions? No, there is a microphone. No, no, you have to go there, you know, because there is a microphone ready. You must not be a spectator, you must be an actor.
I'm Liborio Stellino, Italian Consul General, but for today I will ask Professor Kerzer to appoint me student at large for all the President's Day. Last year, all the European consuls in Boston had a very interesting occasion to be invited at the Watson Institute to celebrate the 50 years of the Treaties of Rome. And in that occasion, many students asked us a question that I want to ask today to you. And it's very simple: the role of Turkey in the future of Europe.
The most difficult question you asked me. This is another problem dividing Europe. Look, let's go back to the 60s. For many times there was a European broad engagement to have Turkey as a member, you know. So there were expectations by the Turkish people in Turkish government. Then in 1999, in 2 minutes, without any previous agreement, in Helsinki, in 2 minutes, they decided to open the negotiations because there was a favor among the governments sitting around the table. Me too, I was in favor, I have to tell you. Even if I recommend it to be much more prudent, you know, but when France decides, they decide yesterday, you know, and so the negotiations started, but they were so quick in a period in which in Europe you have, in many countries, tensions about immigration, and so the Turkish problem has been put at a popular level, in the same level of, let's say, illegal immigrant of this problem. And so you had in France the decision from the same politician who opened the negotiations, Chirac, to have a referendum about Turkish, you know, and many countries are imitating it. In this case, it's very difficult that Turkey can enter into the Union, because if you think to the political future, I think that Turkey will be very positive inside the Union. But the obstacles and the difficulties are so big that you have to be prudent, as I told to the Turkish government. You know, I made an interview to the Turkish public television in which they asked why you think that we must enter, but slowly. I told, look, I lived in my country, which when my mother was meaning something really frightful, terrible, she told, Mama li Turchi. And so you have to overcome this situation. You have to manage, you know, to work together, to know each other, to link each other for that, you know. And with this type of referendum, the problem now is becoming more and more difficult. Second, from the political point of view, Turkey is not a small country. When Turkey will come in case of, I hope I repeat enlargement, it will be the biggest, the most populous European country. So I was in a meeting of the German members of European Parliament where they told, look, but President, how can you imagine a Europe with the biggest parliamentary group is Turkey's? This is changing. I repeat, I think that will be important to show that Europe is multicultural, is open, but you have to handle with care. This is my clear opinion about that. Go ahead, but with wisdom in terms of time.
Hey, thank you very much for coming. I'm a European, and I very much agree with your ideas about the presidency. You were talking like with the Lisbon Treaty, we would have a EU president for 2.5 years, right?
Yes, Sweden.
How would he be chosen? Because I think it's very important that the citizens feel that they are choosing it. Because right now the EU is very far away from the citizens, and that's, I think, the main problem right now, that people feel that the EU is very far away from it. And also, I have another question. What happens if Lisbon fails? Do you think we should kick Ireland out of the EU if they vote no in September? Because you were talking about a multi-speed Europe. What does that mean?
Multi-speed is clear. One goes slow, another go fast. No, but answering seriously to the two questions, I can answer because I did a joint conference in Bologna last week with the Swedish foreign minister, and we discussed the semester. Sweden is absolutely well-oriented in some of the basic points, and what I recommended also because the Swedish Minister of Foreign Affairs, he had big responsibility in the Balkans, so he knows the area. And we agree that to have Croatia in very soon, you give to Europe new impetus, the idea that you have a political plan. So it's very, very favorable. But he also was frank to tell me, look, Holland is against, UK is hesitating, Germany is strongly in favor, Italy is in favor, and, I am in favor. I shall push for it. But, and he is in this situation. Certainly, we shall have a presidency much more dedicated to the future, but even that there are difficulties. Lisbon, if it's not approved, the existing rules will go on. From this point of view, it's very simple. But this means what I try to explain during my lecture. Lisbon is not the total change of what I told, but is a partial progress that in this moment is necessary. If not, we shall go on with the existing rules. Nothing tragic will happen, but the process will be delayed. With the danger also of some sort of fatigue, of European boredom, and this is very dangerous, especially among young people, because the oldest, they remember that Europe has brought peace. But for the young generation, to tell them that Europe has always been in war for centuries and centuries has no meaning, because they have never seen a war, They don't even think that a war is possible. So we must give some different message for the future, as I tried, to summarize. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. How do you think the current global financial crisis will affect efforts to bring Europe closer together and increase the power of the central government? Because the current responses by different banks of different central countries are causing a lot of tension, and there seems to be a lot of disagreement between the governments of the countries on the proper course of action. So I'm just wondering if you thought there was a new consensus emerging that there has to be a stronger role for a European government at large, and if that would help with the unification efforts.
Maybe absurd, but I think that the crisis in some way has helped Europe, in the sense that there is no more criticism about the euro, no more criticism about the necessity of helping the countries in danger. A united policy on the problem of changing regulations. There are still differences on the use of the budget, but this is normal and also is justified because the policy cannot be the same in countries in which you have 105% debt related to GNP, in countries in which you have 30%. Clearly, you can spend much more if you have no debt than if you have debt. So, broadly speaking, the crisis is helping a little the European solidarity, as sometimes happens in the families in the difficult moments.
Thank you very much for the lecture. I would like to ask, what do you think the role of the European countries play in the global environmental cooperation? And do you think European Union's commitment and determination in tackling global environmental issues such as climate change would change in the current financial crisis? Thank you very much.
On this point of view, I can be a little more positive than some analysis before, because we have, let's say, worked and fighted for the Kyoto Protocol. We got it only, and I do remember that I had to convince Russia, and Putin promised me to make the Duma approve it, and he did in the last day of my commission. In the very last day, telling, look, I promised it and I deliver, because before he was putting difficulties for the Duma, and my objection was, look, the Duma is really so strong vis-a-vis you, so it's, and then he was convinced, But why we did so? Because on the environment, that is brought by the Scandinavian countries, but overall Europe now there is a deep sensibility, and also the European habit helps, because we understand that there are problems that cannot be solved by single governments. There are problems, the environment is a problem that cannot be solved must be solved by all. Because there is no China, no United States, no Europe, we are in the same boat, really. And we worked a lot to go in this direction. And I really think that now the mood in the world has changed. I do hope that it's changing both in the United States and in China. But it was a European merit, I think.
Thank you very much.
I think you were first. Okay. Thank you very much for this inspiring lecture. I would like to ask you, what do you think is the role? You mostly spoke about Europe of nation countries, but I'm from Bavaria in Germany. And in Germany, we've talked a lot, at least back in the 90s, there was a lot of talk about the Europe of regions, and that regions would become more important. What is your...
Yes.
What role do you think regions have in Europe?
I have simply to tell, you have told us Not I am German, I am Bavarian. And this is fantastic, you know. But why the regions are more important now than before? Because of what I told about Europe. Europe is a union of minorities, in which you have not anymore the concept of the monopoly of the state, in which you have various levels of it. And if you think to Spain, to Germany, to to Italy too, many, you know, with the progress of European Union, you have a progress of the regional powers. And I think that will be even more in the future, because you need a flexible Europe, you know. You need a, if in an entity of 500 million people, if you have no flexibility, if you have no, the recognition of the local feeling is a disaster, you know. It's and then also some specific problems were solved because of Europe, you know. In Italy we had the problem, you know very well, the problem of the Südtirol Alto Adige, in which there were tensions, problems there, the German-speaking part of Italy. After Austria came into the Union, there is not any problem, you know. The young people go to study to Innsbruck or to Bologna. The problem is over, you know, because of Europe.
But I was thinking, you know, more recently we've mostly heard about the British are against this or the French are for this. Or, so it seems more recently European discussion has been dominated by these national interests rather than...
Oh, well, of course, but
how
not
can we
only
emphasize that?
Not only recently.
Yeah.
Not only recently. No, the problem, as I try to be very clear on that, national problem are many times against Europe. You know, you know, when I had a fighting with the British Prime Minister. You know, Tony Blair, the former one. You know, he was accusing me when I was president of the Commission. You are far away from people, detached from the people's spirit. And then he blocked it. He didn't want to have in the treaty, and there is not in the Constitution in the treaty, the flag and the anthem. I said, look, Tony, but if there is something close to people, are the flag and the anthem, what do you sing? You know, but this is why, because you have a national policy, as I explained before. People were against Europe, and so the Prime Minister was, I don't want this anthem. And this is, I think I was honest to explain this very, very concrete aspect of that.
Hi, my question is regarding language. What sort of role do you think a unified language will play in trying to strengthen the ties between the European countries and the Union? And how can, or do you think it's possible for these countries to somehow get out of the shadow of the United States if they're still speaking in an English language together?
Look, the problem of language is impossible to afford in Europe, but it is resolved by facts. Let's say, in the Commission, you have 3 official languages, French, English, and German. When I started my job, 60% of intervention were in English, 20 in German, 20 in French. When I finished it, 5 years only, 80 in English, 10 in France, 10 in English. Then, when you have no translators in the informal meetings, you are obliged to speak the language that everybody understands. So step by step, we have a dominating language. The New Latin, English, is clear. But if you have to afford it, it will be absolutely impossible. We cannot have the European patent because you cannot have a patent written in 22 languages. But, you know, and this is a curiosity, but you will like it. When we enlarge it, the European, you know, the problem of translation is tragic, you know, because the number of interpreters, if you want the let's say, point-to-point translation, you know, English to Maltese or Maltese to Latvian, you need the number of interpreters n multiplied n minus 1. Let's say 27 multiplied 26. How can you have it? They don't stay in this room, you know. So we used the Soviet Union system, the pivot language, from Maltese to English, and from English to Latvian, or to the, and we have to do that. You know, I show this example how difficult it is to build that. But the language, there is only way out to let things go. And English now, I repeat, is really dominating the field.
Thank you.
I had two questions, and one financial, one policy. I was wondering, last couple of months, China has criticized the United States for the financial crisis in the world. And I was wondering what the EU stand going to be in relation to China in the future. How are they going to deal with this? And the second question was, after Russia attacked Georgia, so a lot of people believe the next country is going to be Ukraine. What is the European Union going to do in that regard to protect Ukraine, or they're just going to leave it out? So that was my question.
The second question, I think that Europe must protect Ukraine and Georgia, because they are neighbor states, and we organized the so-called Ring of Friends, let's say, to every neighbor state. I was not in favor. I voted against the extension of NATO to Ukraine and Georgia, because if you want to have, you know, some sort of appeasement, you need not to encircle another country. You know, the new world, the multipolar world, needs to have some cushions, you know, some zone of, and so I think that, you know, we must have a special treaty with Ukraine. Ukraine not being in the next future member of the Union, but being part of the Ring of Friends, in which we can share with Ukraine everything but institutions. And this is, I think, a way of protecting without hurting. And they can be friends of Russia also, you know, to say that. Because I think that, and this is not part of our, but I really think that the first agreement that US, the new administration, will do will be with Russia. It's so clear that it's a bargain, it's an easy bargain in respect to the other bargain, you know. I tear off my missiles, I don't put NATO around your house, we help together in other fields. I see so clear, you know, that this, but maybe I am wrong, you know, because common sense is not always is dominating in politics, but this is, regarding China, look, we should need hours to answer to your question, because there are all the most strange ideas, experts who will see in the future the G2, United States and China, there are all the perspectives. In this moment, what I am sure is China will play in a responsible way, because it is absolutely linked financially to the United States. When you are a big creditor, when the credit is big, I don't know if it's better to be creditor or debitor. You know, it's difficult to tell you which is better. You know,
Thank you.
Hi, and thank you for speaking today. My question also kind of involves Russia. As you know, a couple months ago, the national gas company of Russia, Gazprom, had a dispute with Ukraine, and they shut off gas shipments to the Ukraine and most of Europe. In what ways do you see the EU, you know, playing a role to ensure that something like that doesn't happen again? And, you know, does the EU need to take some sort of steps to make sure that they can remain energy independent from Russia and similar crises in the future?
Well, there are two different problems. One is the European strategy on energy, and the second is Ukraine and Russia. Because between Ukraine and Russia, I had to mediate also many years ago when the problem was not known, because, you know, the Russian accused the Ukrainians to sip, to make holes in the pipes, and, you know, let us, you know. So I am unable to look at the real problems in it because Ukraine has a special price on Russian gas. Don't forget that the problem is much more complex. For the European policy energy, is another aspect of the European division. When I met one of the two twins, the Polish twin, you know, the President of the Republic, he was furious against the German idea of having a pipeline going from Russia undersea and to Germany. They say it is against Poland and so on. And my answer was very simple, you know. I said, look, but why don't we work together to have a European system of pipelines and a common energy policy? And so what arrives in Germany arrives in Poland. What arrives in Italy from Libya or Algeria arrives also in Denmark, you know. Oh, no, because the Polish independence, you know. It's, when you have this contradiction, you say, look, let us wait. And the crisis is helping a bit, as I told before.
Thank you.
Hello, Professor Prodi. My question is, well, basically American history, 13 very different states with very bitter differences were able to kind of form a framework to for the federal government. And I'm wondering if American history was and is being studied to make the European Union work, and whether the American case was a particular one because of the imminent pressure of British invasion.
No, American cases, well, I am hopeful about Europe because I am looking at American history. And you needed a lot of time, and also a war, a terrible war, to be united. So I say, look, even we shall need time. But from many other points of view, it was much easier. Problem of language, problem of many empty territories. Here you have states with a long history, you know, with, you know, what I look at my experience of trying not to mediate, but to, let's say, lower the tension between Polish and German. Because there is something, you know, history, you know, it's, and this was not so in the United States, you know, so this is the main difference. And this is why I think, look, let us give time, you know, let us go on. Let us go at different speed, and then, you know, people will understand. But we have to do it with democracy. For example, many say, look, we have to oblige Irish people to have a second referendum. I say, no, they will decide what to do, because these are horrible rules that few 100,000 votes block 500 million people, but these are the rules, and you have to respect them. And democracy is democracy. Even, you know, I want new rules, but now I want to respect the existing rules. You know, and this is why I say, look, American history is very important, but it was, from many point of view, much easier with US. Last two questions, and then go.
Hello, thank you for speaking to us today. I come from Bosnia and Herzegovina, probably the most unstable country in Europe. I believe the only country in the world that has 3 presidents at the same time.
Yeah, and when I went the first time, they did not talk each other.
Yeah.
No, look. When you think to the tragedy of history, he's Bosnian. The first time I went to Bosnia, I had to talk with the 3 different leaders, president, prime minister, and president of the parliament, and now they talk each other. But in the beginning, they don't even talk each other.
So it's one of the most unstable countries in Europe, and I would like to ask you, what do you think when Bosnia will join the European Union? A couple of minutes ago, you said that the ethnical problems are a much smaller problem within the European Union.
Perfect.
So should Bosnia firstly join the European Union in order easier to solve the ethnical problems, or should...
Yes, it's the only way out. The only way out. Because otherwise, the sons of the soldiers that now accompany to school the Bosnian children because of safety, they will accompany the sons of the children. We can't go on this way. This is why I'm pushing so hard, because you can't say Bosnia tomorrow, but you must have Croatia now, and then Macedonia, and then Serbia, Bosnia. If you don't go on with this process, will never be completed. And it's also because of Bosnia that I am so adamant. The only solution for Bosnia is European Union. But if the process does not start again, when I started with Slovenia, I was going to Slovenia to tell them, look, don't open the mouth against the Croatians. And then to Croatia, please be happy because Slovenia enters, otherwise you will never do it. And now the process started, and this moment, this terrible moment, and they stopped it. I don't know why, because this is not politics, Politics is thinking to the future, and clear there is no other future for Bosnia, unless, well, if they want, because it's always voluntary, but. So when I cannot give you the answer, because if the process starts, can be not a long time, because it's not a big country, it's not a problem from the economic point of view. But if the process does not start with Croatia, that have all the political and financial situation that is absolutely, they could enter tomorrow. If they don't start with Croatia, even Bosnia will wait for it.
I have a feeling that the leaders will never agree about certain policies in Bosnia. So would it be easier to solve those problems within the European Union?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely yes.
Hello, thank you very much for speaking to us today. I had a question about foreign policy, European foreign policy. Do you think that there should be a unified common foreign policy and maybe a foreign policy minister for Europe? And also, going back to the Iraq war, do you think that the fact that countries disagreed in the European Union about which stance to have for the war makes the European Union weaker than if it had a unified front?
For the second question, I say yes. Make Europe. It was, I was so emotional about the Iraqi war because it has broken us, it's broken us, and it was difficult to reorganize. I don't say about the United States, I say inside Europe. For the first question, I don't know. I explained how difficult it is. I explained what is on the table. I do hope that the Lisbon Treaty will approve it. And so when you have a president for 2 years and a half and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, well, you make a progress. you know, so can be even soon, you know. Let us hope.